All right, so we have 1 3/5 plus 4 2/4. All right, so anytime you guys are dealing with mixed numbers, you always want to change your mixed numbers to improper fractions. One shortcut that I see that people tend to make is they will change their fractions to decimals and then do the math. The only reason why I don't recommend shortcuts is because shortcuts won't always work, especially if you guys are given what is called like a repeating decimal. Like say if you have like 0.333, it keeps going on and on and on. You wouldn't be able to do that conversion because it'll force you to round in the beginning of the question and you always round at the end. All right, so you always want to pick a method that is tried and true no matter what values they give you, because you don't want to second guess yourself during the exam. All right, so if we want to change a mixed number to improper fraction, we do the whole number times whatever is in the bottom. So 1 times 5 is 5, and then we add that to the top. So 5 plus 3 is 8, so we have 8/5. All right, and repeat the same thing here. 4 and 4 give us 16. All right, and then 16 plus 2 gives us 18/4. All right, so when I teach adding fractions, I do what's called the butterfly method, which gives us a common denominator. Some people find the least common denominator. It's definitely up to you. If you've already mastered least common denominator, I would say stick with that. If you're a person who's always had trouble with fractions, then I would say try the butterfly method because it makes it a little bit easier. So the very first thing you do is you always want to multiply straight across the bottom. So 5 times 4 gives us 20. And then we're going to cross multiply both sides. So we're going to say 8 times 4 here, which gives us 32. And then 5 times 18, which is going to give us 90. All right, and then from here we just simplify. So if I do 32 plus 90, that's going to give me 122 over 20. All right, so this is called an improper fraction, and we know it's improper because the number at the top is bigger than the number on the bottom. So how do we change this to a mixed number? All right, so the good thing is that you guys are given a 4-function calculator for this exam. So you can, if you're not a person who knows how to do this like offhand, there's a way that you can use long division to help you to be able to do that. So the number on the bottom goes on the outside and the number on the top goes on the inside. So you're going to use your calculator to show you, I put the wrong number, 122. You're going to use your calculator to show you what your whole number is. So it helps to kind of can you go? Okay, there we go. It helps to kind of be able to alleviate that. All right, so if we do 122 divided by 20, you see how we have 6.1? Well, we know that our whole number is 6. So that's going to be the value that goes up top. All right, and then that's going to be my whole number. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and do the math to figure out what our actual fraction is going to be. So if I say 6 times 20, that gives me 120. All right, and if I subtract that, I have 2 left over. So whatever your remainder is, that's the top of your fraction. And then whatever is on the outside of your division problem, that's going to be the bottom. All right, so we use this logic, that's going to give us 6 and 2 over 20. And then anytime you guys are dealing with fractions, they always have to be reduced down, always, always, always. So those can both be reduced by 2. And reduce just means we're dividing. So that gives us 6 and 1/10, which was C. So with fractions, the easiest way to master fractions is you have to keep practicing them. So in the workbook, there are 120 practice questions specifically just for fractions. You have to keep doing it over and over again until you find your groove. Because once you find your groove, it's going to be really, really hard for you to make a mistake. So you always just want to be clear as to where you are. All right, so go ahead and try number 2 for me.
It's time for. Let's do it right quick again. Come back. Yeah, you just gonna have a quick one. So you gotta have to know man in the morning. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, so you probably won't be playing outside tomorrow. They'll probably play on the inside.
Please make sure you guys mute your mics.
It's up to my teacher. My teachers don't want it. It would be good tomorrow we get you guys if we don't.
All right, so we take a look at number 2. It says the distance between two cities on a map measures 2 inches, but their actual distance is 250 miles. Well, the actual distance apart is 250 miles. Using the same map, a student measured the distance between 2 new cities to be 5 inches. How many actual miles apart are the new cities? So the correct answer in this case, we got to circle that one, is going to be A. All right, so this is going to be an example of a word problem involving proportions. So the good thing about proportions in terms of the actual math of it is very simple to solve. You just have to be able to recognize it. So if you watched any of my review videos, then you know that a dead giveaway with proportions is that you guys will be given 3 values and you're going to be looking for a 4th. So in this case, we have 2. We have 250 and we have 5. All right, so the most important thing you can do is you need to set up your units first. What are the numbers describing? So 2 is describing inches. So I know that's one of my units. And then 250 is describing miles. And of course, 5 is describing inches. So that lets me know I'm going to be dealing with inches and I'm going to be dealing with miles. All right, so you always want to fill in your units first because this is where people tend to make the most mistakes. Sometimes people kind of start guessing where to put the actual values in, and you don't want to do that. All right, so I know I have inches and miles. So of course, if they're in the same sentence, they're on the same side. So you always want to make sure that your units match across. So if I have inches up top on the left, then I have to have inches up top on the right. If I have miles on the bottom on the left, then I need to have miles on the bottom on the right. All right, and then from here we can go ahead and fill in our values. So I know that for every 2 inches, that was 250 miles. And then we're trying to figure out how many actual miles based on 5 inches. All right, so when I do proportions, I don't actually add the variable in there just because that tends to confuse people a little bit more. But if you're a person and you're comfortable with using variables, that's fine. All right, so you always cross multiply where you have 2 values. So you see how I have 250 and I have 5. I cross multiply there because the 2 is here and this space is empty. I don't have anything to multiply it against. All right, so if I do 250 times 5, that's going to give me 1,250. And then you always divide by the value that's left over. So the only other value we have is 2. So we divide by 2, and that's going to give us the 625. Is that right? 625? Yeah, 625. 625 miles. All right. So super simple, super straight to the point. You just have to make sure again that you recognize when they give you 3 values and you're looking for a 4th, that's generally going to be your setup. And that's the same with ratios as well. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at number 3. So this is going to be being able to look at a graph, and this is also going to cross-reference with percentages. So let's see how you guys do, and then put your answer below in the chat for me. All right, so let's take a look at the question. It says, according to the graph below, how many students prefer pepperoni pizza if a total of 150 surveys were given? All right, so if we take a look at our graph, this is a circle graph, which is normally made up of percentages. Sometimes it can be based on whole numbers, but primarily percentages, and it's describing favorite pizza toppings. So we have sausage, we have pineapple, we have cheese, and we have pepperoni. So one thing you want to make sure you know how to do is read a graph. Very important for this test, and it could be a bar graph, it could be a circle graph, it could be a histogram, but you guys have to make, it could be a scatter plot. You have to make sure you can read graphs and their labels so you understand what the data is describing. So what is the question asking us? It says, how many students prefer pepperoni if a total of 150 surveys were given? So the correct answer is B. How did we get this particular answer? So dead giveaway. Anytime you guys are given a circle graph and it's based on percentages, and within the question is describing whole numbers, you're always going to multiply. Another dead giveaway, of course, is going to be the word of, because we're saying how many students preferred pepperoni if the total of, that means we're pulling a piece of that, 150 surveys were given. All right, and there's two different ways you can do it. I'll show you guys a short way, and then I'll show you guys the is over of that works every time. So it kind of just depends on where you are in terms of skill level. So I know that pepperoni accounts for 33%. So if I do my total times the actual percentage, that will give me the value that I'm looking for. So I know there's a total of 150 times 33%. So you can't do the math of percentages in terms of multiplying with it in percent form. You have to convert it to a decimal. So that's a sub skill that you guys have to know in order to be able to solve this. So we go two places to the left. So that's going to give me 0.33. All right, times 150, which is going to give me 49.5. All right, and of course we can't have half a person. So even if we look at our answer choices, in this case, 50 would be the closest answer. So roughly 50 people. Now, if we look at the traditional way, which is how I like to teach it, it just depends on who you are and where you are. In terms of content, I love to use is over of is equal to percent over 100, because this will take you through a couple of different types of problems and it'll always work. And you're not really racking your brain so much as to how to solve it. All right, so percent, of course, is given. They give us the 33%, so that's going to be our percent. All right, and then 150 comes after the word of, so that's going to be our value in the bottom. So if we go ahead and we plug those in, I know that I have 150 on the bottom, and I have 33 up top, and then 100, of course, is always given in this particular factor. And then these are examples from cluster 2 in the workbook under percentages. And then we just solve this math-wise the same way that we do proportions. You cross multiply where you have two values. So we say 150 times 33, which is going to give us some large number. 4,950. And then, of course, we divide by the value that's left over. In this case, it's 100. So 4,950 divided by 100, which is going to give us the 49.5. So two different ways to do the same problem. If you ask me, preferably, I prefer this way if you're a person that's a little shaky in math and you need something that's consistent. But if you know that when you see the word of, you have to multiply, you can do that as well. It just doesn't work for every scenario. So it definitely just depends on you. All right, go ahead and try number 4 for me, please. Convert 0.342 to a percentage. So this one should be super quick and super easy for everybody. Super easy, number 4. All right, so it says convert 0.342 to a percentage. So we're going from a decimal to a percent. So anytime you go from a decimal to a percent, you're always going to move your decimal 2 places to the right. All right, and wherever it lands is where it lands. So in this case, it will be 34.2%, which is 8. All right, and the way that you can remember that is if I go from decimal to percentage, if you think of the alphabet, to get from the letter D to the letter P, you have to move to the right. So that's how you would know it. It's always 2 spaces. All right, go ahead and try number 5 for me so we can see where you guys are. All right, let's take a look at number 5. It says Trevor's monthly salary is $4,500. He pays $200 for health insurance, $50 for life insurance, $25 for dental, and $10 for vision each month. Calculate his net annual salary. So your trigger here is net annual salary. When you see net annual salary, that lets you know that, hey, I need to figure out how much am I bringing in minus the deductions. That's what net means. Net means minus the deductions. Of course, we know annual means for the entire year. All right, so we know he makes $4,500, but he has to pay a couple different bills. He has to pay health insurance, he has to pay life insurance, he has to pay dental, and he has to pay vision. So we need to deduct all of that out, which means we need to subtract everything out before we can even determine how much it is an entire year. We're gonna do it by the month first. So he has $4,500. All right, and then we're going to take out the health insurance. We're going to take out the life insurance. We're going to take out dental, and then we're going to take out vision. All right, and then once we subtract all of that out, that is going to leave us with $4,215. So this is his net monthly. This is what he's bringing in every month. But the question wants to know what is his net annual salary. The reason why I wanted to point this out, because you may get a question that just wants the net in a month. They may not want the yearly. So you have to understand what you're doing when you're doing the math. You know, sometimes we'll get so caught up in doing something a certain way we will do more than what they're asking. So always be clear as to what they're asking. All right, and of course, we want to know net annual. We know that there are 12 months in the year, so we just multiply this times 12, and that's going to give us C, which is $50,580. So good job, of course, to everyone who answered. So what I am noticing is that the number of people who are answering the questions versus the number of people who are here is definitely not matching up. So you want to make sure that you're at least trying to answer the questions. That's the whole point of doing a review, is you at least just want to try, you know, just kind of to see where you are. Don't look at it as, oh, I'll go back and look at it later, or I'll try it later. Like, no, just try it while we're doing it. So at least you can make note as to what you're doing, what you don't know. All right, go ahead and try number 6 for me, please. All right, so number 6 says estimate the length of an indexing. So when we say estimate means we're just taking an edge, kind of like a hypothesis, educated guess. We're just saying based on what they're giving us, what's the best scenario based on what they're asking. All right, so with these, I always tell people you kind of want to work backwards from the answers. You want to do like a process of elimination first, just so we can kind of see what we can get out of our visual, and then we'll go from there. All right, so it says estimate the length. So we know we're dealing with length of an index finger. So we have 11 inches, 11 millimeters, 11 grams, and 11 centimeters. Well, I know just offhand, I can go ahead and eliminate 11 grams because that has to do with mass. And we're looking for length. So now instead of me looking and comparing 4 different answers, now we're down to 3. All right, so now let's look at our units. We have inches, we have millimeters, and we have centimeters, right? All right, well, I know that if I look at my finger, right, you know how we have those lines on our fingers? Like normally everybody has 2, 3. The space in between each of those lines is normally about an inch. We're saying on average, of course it changes from person to person, but it gives you visually about how wide an inch is. So if we look at our fingers, right, and the space in between those lines is about 1 inch, that lets you know that 11 inches is too long for one. Another thing too, a ruler is 12 inches long. So 11 is very close to 12, which means our index finger is nowhere near the same length as a ruler. You always want to find everyday things or things that you've seen a lot and you have an idea of the measurements to help you with the process of elimination. So inches is out. All right, so now I have 11 millimeters and I have 11 centimeters. So based on those two, we think of our index finger. Millimeters are super small. They would use like millimeters to like measure the length of like an eyelash or something very small, very minute. And then of course, centimeters is kind of next under inches because you have 2.5 centimeters for every 1 inch. All right, if that makes sense. So in this particular instance, D would be the best estimate, just because millimeters is just too small. Millimeters are less than centimeters, a fraction of those actually. So with these types of questions, it just comes practice. Practice helps you to create a context. It's not really just like one way you can just say, oh, you're gonna know it's this. No, you kind of gotta use common sense a little bit, and you have to be familiar with the actual units. So I would suggest for these types of questions, if you do get a question, it may be one question like this, but I have seen that people have gotten questions just like this though, in different contexts. So you want to make sure that you at least practice it so you can get a guaranteed point. And you should be good to go. All right, so we made it through our first 6 questions. So overall, I think everybody's doing pretty good. I did see that there were a couple of different answers for C. For 6, so that lets me know that that's something that you guys need to practice. In the workbook, I have practice questions for that located in cluster 1. So make sure if you have it, you go back and you review it. If you didn't answer it correctly, you should be good to go. All right, so do I have any questions so far before we go into our next page?
Hello, I do have a question for number 1. So I know that my calculator gave me 6.1, which is 1/10. However, 20 goes into 6. I'm sorry, 20 goes into 122 6 times. I thought how many were left over? Why is it not 2/10? That just help me understand that.
So it's not 2/10 because when we did the math, it was 122 over 20, right? So whenever you do your conversion, the bottom number is always whatever it started as. You can't change it to 20. It has to reduce down. But when we're doing the actual math of it, we're saying that, okay, 20 goes into 122 6 times, right? I know that it has a remainder of 2. Now you see this 20 we started with, this has to travel over. That doesn't change until it's time to reduce. But when you do your first conversion from improper to a mixed number, the denominator or the number in the bottom is always the same. And then the only thing that it changes is if we go ahead and reduce. And in this case, we reduced by 2, which means we divided by 2. And that's how we ended up with 1/10. But you can't skip that part though. It has to travel. And then
that's the part I was skipping. That was it. I because I kept saying I know the answer because it was 6.1. So I'm like, I know the answer is 6 1/10. However, I was skipping the carrying the 20 over. Okay, I did a million of those and I still forgot that step. So thank you. Because now I won't forget it.
No problem. All right, do we have any other questions before we move on? Please don't be afraid to ask questions. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So on the TEAS, if like the answers are not in the mixed fraction form, do we always have to reduce it?
Yes, so one rule of thumb with fractions is they'll never give you like a question with fractions and say reduce in the end. It's just like kind of like an unwritten rule that they always have to be reduced. Now, one thing I do know is 99% of the time, once you end up with like an improper fraction, like see how we had the 122 over 20, it's always converted back to a mixed number. But I do tell people you still have to be aware that 122 over 20 is the same thing as 6 over 220 and same thing as 6 and 1/10. So you have to know that all of these are equal, because what if they don't give it to you in that form? You know what I mean? And you're looking for it. So you just have to have a clear understanding as to no matter which form it's in, they all still give you the same answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Nope, we did fractions, we did proportions. We did an example of interpreting data from a graph, but this one was based on percentages, converting decimals to percentages. We did net annual salary, which falls under solving 1 or 2-step word problems involving rational numbers. And then number 6 was an example of estimation, applying estimation strategies. So any questions before we move on? No? Yes, maybe. All right, let's take a look at number 7. All right, so this is an example of translating a phrase, and this can be found in cluster 5. All right, so let's try number 7. All right, so if we take a look at number 7, it says 4 more than 3 times B is no more than 68. And the correct answer is A. All right, so let's delve into it. So with these types of questions, you have to know your keywords. That's really what's most important, is understanding what goes where. All right, so let's go ahead and let's break everything down. Let's label everything and let's see how we got this answer. All right, so it says 4, and then of course we're saying more than 3, and I'm just circling, whatever I'm circling is gonna be the actual operation. 3 times B is no more than 68. All right, so let's plug in our numbers so I can kind of see what those look like. All right, so I have where our numbers and our variables. All right, so we have 4, 3, B, and 68. All right, let's go in, let's add our signs for our math so that we can see where things go. So more than, of course, we know means to add, times means that we multiply, no more than. So anytime we're dealing with inequalities, right? Especially in this sense, I always like to teach it in reference to money. If I go to the store and I can spend no more than $20, no more than 20, that means I can spend $20 or less. That 20 is inclusive of that. So you got to make sure you understand what the particular verbiage is or what vocabulary is. So if you kind of relate it to money, it makes it easier. I always relate it to spending money. At the most, I can spend $10. That's the most I can spend, $10 or less. I want no less than $100, meaning I want $100 or more. So try to relate it to something that you're used to dealing with. Money just makes it easier for me. All right, so if we write it out like we see it, we have 4 plus 3 times B is less than or equal to 68. All right, and we're going to go ahead and simplify it. So we're going to say 4, and then 3 times B, of course, is 3B, is less than or equal to 68. So this is how it looks when we write it just as we see it. Now, as a rule of thumb, normally what happens, and this is what I prefer to teach, is that anytime you have an addition of something or a subtraction of something, see how it's 4 more than? Anytime something is more than something, you normally tag it on the back end of it. So it's like saying plus 4, not necessarily 4 plus something. The reason why I wrote it out that way is because that's how it reads as you see. That's how you see it as you read it. But what you really should be doing is you should be looking at context and understanding what they're actually saying. Anytime I want more than something, I'm tacking it on to whatever I have. So in this sense, it's something plus 4. And of course, we know that's going to be 3 times the B, which is less than or equal to 68. So I would say get in the groove of putting whatever is added to the back, because anytime you subtract, it's always going to come second anyway. Now, these two are the same answer because order does not matter with addition. If I do 2 plus 5, that's 7. If I do 5 plus 2, it's still 7. But you need to be aware that these answers are the same. More times than not, the answer form will be in the second choice with the 4 in the back or the value in the back, but just be aware that it could be presented anyway. Does that make sense to everybody, the way that I said that? Yes? No? Maybe. All right, go ahead and try number 8 for me. That is going to be an example of a conversion within a system, and you guys can find that in cluster. Conversions are in cluster 1 of the workbook. All right, so go ahead and try number 8 and then put your answer in the chat box below. All right, if we take a look at number 8, it says 42.56 grams is equivalent to how many kilograms? All right, so the correct answer in this case is C. So the way that I teach conversions within the system is I like to use an acronym. So of course, if you have the book or if you looked at any of my tutorials, you'll see that I use it all the time. And the reason why I like to use it is because it's tried and true no matter what conversions you use. I know some people like to memorize the conversion factors, but this just makes it a little bit easier because it's only decimal movement from left to right. So it's King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk. All right, and of course, each letter is going to be the first letter of whatever the particular prefix is. So I know I'm going from grams, which is a base. So I'm going from grams to kilograms. All right, so that lets me know I'm going to go to the left. And you're always going to count however many spaces to see. So we're going once, twice, 3 times to the left. So that's going to tell me where my decimal is going. So if I have 42.56, I'm going to go 3 spaces to the left. So I always like to do ice cream scoops. Every scoop should have 1 value. So once, twice, 3 times. Anytime you have an empty scoop, you have to add a 0 as a placeholder. All right, and that's how we got C as our answer. So I did see a question on here in reference to number 7. The question was, how do you know to include the equal sign? So, and that's one thing I messed up too on here as well, because all of this should have been in the same circle. So equal sign normally is just the word is. If it was just is, like is 68, it would have been equal. I have a whole chart that I created with all of the keywords for you guys. In cluster, I'm lagging a little bit today. Cluster 5. There's a table in there that shows you all of your keywords for these types of questions. All right, so we only got 6 minutes left, so let's see if we can get the last 2 questions in, and then we'll be good to go. All right, number 9 for me, please. Put it below. Number 9. All right, number 9 says 24 is 75% of what number? So the answer is A. Now, this is an example of what is called a percent proportion, and you can find this in cluster 2 of the workbook under percentages. Percent proportions are just like, I'll show you another example. Just like number 3, this is another example. This is another example of percent proportions where we use the is over of. So just a different way that it can be presented to you guys. So they'll always give you 2 values, and you'll be looking for a third. All right, so we have 24, we have 75%, and then our key indications are the is and the of. That helps us to kind of be able to do our setup. All right, so remember when I did it in the last question, the setup is always going to be is over of is equal to percent over 100, and 100 is a given. It'll always be there. All right, so I know that 75%, of course, is going to be my percent because it has a percentage, and then 24 is going to be my is because it comes before the word is. All right, so if we go ahead and we substitute everything in, we're going to have 24 up top, and then we're going to have 75 on the top and 100 on the bottom. And then now we're back into that familiar space of understanding how to solve. So you cross multiply where you have 2 values. So if you do 24 times 100, that is going to give you 2,400. And then you divide by the value that's left over. So if we say 2,400 divided by 75, that's going to give us 32. All right, and I think everybody got that one right, which is great. All right, so let's do one last one for the row. Go ahead and do number 10 for me, and then we will be good to go. All right, so number 10. All right, and if we take a look at our last question, which is number 10, it says the 7th grade class at Lily's middle school consists of 125 boys and 200 girls. What is the ratio of girls to boys? So anytime you guys are doing like any type of question, you always want to create what I call triggers. You want to know that when you read a certain type of question, you already kind of want to know what your setup is, because once you kind of get into that space, you're not second guessing yourself. I would not recommend going into the test having several different ways to do one type of question. You need to pick one thing that's going to work every single time so that as soon as you see it, you know exactly what to do. You have to kind of create that type of reaction to questions so you're not overthinking things. So of course, our giveaway or your trigger is the word ratio, because they want to know what's the ratio. And another one is the word to, because we're comparing two things. Whatever comes before the word to is our first element. Whatever comes after the word to is going to be our second element. So if we look at the question, it says the 7th grade class at Lily's Middle School consists of 125 boys. So I know I have 125, and that's describing the number of boys, and I have 200, and that's describing the number of girls. So when you see the word to, that kind of lets you know where your colon is. Remember, anytime we are dealing with ratios, ratios can be written 3 different ways, using a colon, using the word to, or as a fraction. You have to know those 3. All right, so if we want to know the ratio of girls to boys, well, I know that there are 200 girls, and I know that there are 125 boys. So at first glance, someone would say, well, the answer is 200 to 125. So one rule of thumb that you have to remember with ratios is, remember, a ratio can also be written as a what? As a fraction. And fractions always have to be what? They have to be reduced every single time. They're not going to tell you to do it. They're just going to assume that you know that. So if I rewrite 200 over 200 colon 125 as a fraction, it's going to be 200 on top and 125 on the bottom. Well, how can I reduce that down? What do they have in common? Well, they both have the number 25 in common. So if I divide both of those by 25, I get 8 over 5, which of course is the same thing as 8 colon 5. Which is 8. All right. So the math of it is pretty straightforward, but remember, that's a small sub skill. Remembering to reduce. And I think you guys will be pretty good. So today I feel like we covered a pretty good variety of topics. If we go back from the top, we looked at adding fractions, adding mixed numbers. We did a word problem with proportions. You guys got a word problem. We had to interpret data given a graph, and that was based on percentages this time around. We did a one or multi-step word problem involving rational numbers. That was our net annual salary. We did an example of applying estimation strategies here. We did translating a sentence into an inequality, conversions, percent proportion, and then we also did ratios. So that just gives you guys an idea of how diverse the content can actually be. Now, all of these questions come from my practice test edition. So if you don't have it, I would suggest getting it. I actually just put it on sale for you guys this week for 50% off. So they're normally $30. So this week you can either get the hard copy of this book, or you can get the digital version of this book for only $15, and you don't need a code. You can just get it off the website, and I will put the link down below. So I have a question. It says, how often will we have these classes? This is my first time. So normally I used to try to do these classes every other week, but because I am really busy with finishing up my new kids series, I don't have as much free time as I normally do, which I hate. But I'll be back to normal like the end of next month. But I have any reviews that I've actually done like within the group though. You can always go back and search those, or you can check out my YouTube tutorial. Are those the hard copies that were sold out? No. So this is the practice test edition. This is a smaller book. This is one that includes 5 full-length practice tests. This is the book with the black cover. Now my main book with all of like the practice questions and the examples, that one is sold out hard copy wise, but the digital one is available. And digital books are great too, because they give you the option to save and print. So what some people will do is they will get the digital book, they'll print it out and they'll put it in a binder, which helps them to be able to add their own notes and customize it more to their liking. So those books are expected to be here the week after next, but it always changes kind of depending on shipping. So yeah, you can find all of this stuff on my website. I did drop the link. I don't know why it's not, what you call it. Yeah, you guys can find all this stuff online. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
If we get the ebook, I know that you had a bundle, and I know I posted in a group. I know that you had a bundle. Is it possible to still be able to order the other things that would have normally come with the bundle?
So when I do the bundles, I'm trying to think. Are you saying like if you want to order like the bundle with the white book and then get the white book when it comes in?
I think, because I think you said that the bundle was with the hard copy and that the ebook didn't have the online, I guess, things that were added onto it. So is it possible to, because I'm trying to debate if I want to wait for the book to come in, or if I should get the ebook and then still have, you know, find a way to purchase the other online things that you had available.
Okay, yeah, so when the as far as the hard copy, when I say online resources, that just includes all of the YouTube tutorials. So that all of the YouTube tutorials cover all of the example questions, but it doesn't include, like I have like online practice tests that you guys can buy. Those aren't included in the book. I have a bundle that includes, like you can buy like the book, you get both books, and then you get the cluster reviews. Now those are online practice tests. I have that as a bundle, but not my full length practice test, I don't think.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But if you have like any more specific questions, just send me a message so I can kind of be more clear as to what you're asking, and then I can make sure I can answer it as best as possible. All right, any more questions before we get out of here? Yes, no, maybe?
I have one question. Is Roman numerals on the test?
So I do know that when it was the TEAS 5, it was a for sure thing. Now TEAS 6, they don't have it listed, but I have seen, you know, when people like make comments about, you know, the test and what you should study for, some people have seen Roman numerals on there. If you need help with Roman numerals, go to the, I'll show it to you.
Okay.
I was gonna say in the group, you want to make sure you check out the files tab. I'll show you guys how to check out everything. All right, so you see how we're in a group. So you go to the files tab. So the files tab is like anything that I've ever uploaded, and it's all free stuff you guys can download and you can keep. And these are all practice things. So we have proportions, we have a whole practice test, we have notes for reading, I have things in here for English, have things in here for science. But I know for sure that I have a worksheet for Roman numerals. See right there at the bottom where it says Roman numerals, notes and practice. That'll definitely help you, because if you do get a question, it'll probably be one. Nothing too major, but make sure you guys check out the files tab in the group, because all of these are really great files that I added to the group myself that I felt like you guys could benefit from.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so the question says, what promotion do you have now on your website? So currently on the website, I added the practice test edition, which is what we were looking at today. Those are both 50% off, the physical copy and the digital copy. All of my online practice tests are 50% off right now. So those are always a great investment to make as well. All right, any more questions before we get out of here? No? All right, well, thank y'all so much for participating today. I hope that I was able to answer all of your questions today. Of course, if you guys have any questions, you can always send me a message on Facebook. Sometimes I'm a little lagging with the Facebook just because I'm not on there all the time, but I will answer them as quick as possible. So I hope y'all enjoyed the review today, and I hope everybody has a really great day and a really great week. And I'll see you guys next time.